Okay, so hello, you all know who I am. It's me, it's Pastor Garlinda Price. I wanted to play something for you just to set the tone for where we're going tonight, okay? It'll just take a second.
Say yes.
Will you say yes? Oh my God, I'm fired up. I tell you, I got some good stuff to share with you all tonight. So I want to start it out with just this song was in my spirit.
Will your heart and soul.
So God wants to know, will you say yes, right? Will you say yes? Even when people put you down. Even when people say you're not called.
Will your spirit still say yes?
Even when you doubt whether or not you're called or qualified, will you still say yes?
There is more that I
Require of thee. So God is just asking tonight, right?
Will your heart,
Will your heart and soul say yes? So I'm going to post this song down below. Because some of you need to have a yes for God, right? So I didn't mean to cut it off so abruptly, but some of y'all need to say yes to God and stop worrying about what people think. So let me just share with you what got me fired up. It's a couple of things, right? But I had a chance, y'all know, I just don't know what's going on with this hair right now. But anyway, so I'm Pastor Garlinda Price with Common Ground Ministries, and I'm excited tonight for so many reasons. But one I want to share with you is today I had this revelation of the Bible study that Marvin taught last night. And we taught about, or one of the things he shared on his Facebook Live when we did the Bible study was that sometimes Christians believe they don't have to go through anything because we're Christians. So we shouldn't have to go through anything. And today it happened to be, we're working on a project, and I hope to be able to share that with you soon, hopefully at the end of the month. And I was working, and when I arrived at the project, I just had this epiphany come over me, like this revelation, this gratefulness, just a heart of gratefulness. Like I wanted to cry, but I was in front of a bunch of people, right? But I had this amazing moment of gratitude because God is so good. It had been such a trial going through this process, this project we started like back in July. And just before the project started, I was crying every day, crying every morning. I was like, what is going on? I thought I was crying because I was scared. A part of me was scared. Then I thought I was crying because I was excited, but my spirit, I realized now, was crying because we were going to go through. When I say some trials and people have made me want to pure tea strangle them, but God was working out patience and working out testing. So last night we talked about testing and temptation and the difference where God will send you tests, the enemy will send you temptation. Temptation tempts the flesh and makes you want to move outside of your flesh and commit sin, where tests will come to see, do you hearken to and hear the voice of God? So that's one thing I wanted to share with you today. So be mindful that if you're going through a test, it's to God's glory. And if you change your lens and look at it differently, we're going to talk about a lens change in a minute. But if you change your lens and look at it differently, you will begin to see what God sees versus what your eyes see. So then I got to thinking about, this is something else that I've heard over the past couple of weeks, that I've heard actually for a little while, and it's really been in my mind. So I had the chance, as you know, to share on a platform, on a panel at a conference a few weeks ago. And one of the beautiful pastors that I met, I couldn't wait to meet her. I think I told you I had met her here on Facebook, and I finally got to meet her in person. And we were talking about, she's written several books. She's written 2, and she's working on 3 other books. And she said that one thing she thought about whenever she planned her first women's conference, and whenever she got ready to write her first blog post, she was like, who knows who I am? Who even knows me? So when God called her, her question to herself was, who even knows me? I felt like she and I had been separated at birth, because when I started to do these videos, I was like, God, nobody knows me. Like, who's going to listen to what I have to say? People will make you doubt yourself, and sometimes you'll make you doubt yourself, right? But I'm confident in who God has called me to be. I'm confident in the things that He's told me to coach and teach women on. Why? Because I know, right? And because He knows, and that He who called is faithful. And so God has called you to do some things. Don't let naysayers stop you from doing what God has called you to do. Don't let self-doubt and critique stop you from doing what God has called you to do. If nobody shows up, you show up. If nobody signs up, you sign up. If nobody gets on your call, you get on on the call, right? If nobody buys your book, still sell the book anyway, still market the book anyway. If nobody comes to your store, you show up at your store and begin to pray and speak over your store what you want to see, right? If God has called you to the homeless and you go there and they curse you and they don't want to be bothered by you, go anyway. Whatever it is that God has called you to, be faithful over it. It doesn't matter who approves, who accepts, who knows you, who doesn't know you, who cares? He knows you, and he that called you is faithful. And so I'm confident in who God has called me to be. I'm confident in the experiences that I've had that will bless women. And then I want to share with you, I don't know, I'm just telling you, there's so many great things that are happening for the people of God. And those of you that have shrunk back, shrunk back, I don't even know if slink and slunk are words, but come forth and don't hide out. It doesn't matter, because this is your testing ground. This is your proving ground, right? So far be it for you to practice with no one or with a few people than to show up with hundreds of people and jack it all up. So sometimes you got to know that this is your testing ground. This is your practice field. So one thing I wanted to share with you is I looked up before we got on the video is how long was David anointed king before he became king? It said David spent this time probably 15 years or so living as a fugitive, hunted by the king, his future in doubt. Even when King Saul died, David didn't immediately take his throne. David became king of his own tribe, Judah, while Saul's son Ishbosheth ruled the rest of the nation. So 15 years David waited for a position he was anointed for 15 years prior. It's all good. Your day is coming. How long did it take Jesus to begin his ministry, right? So it says about 30 years. In the Christian Gospels, the ministry of Jesus begins with his baptism in the countryside of Roman Judea and Transjordan near the River Jordan, and ends in Jerusalem following the Last Supper with his disciples. The Gospel of Luke in 3:23 states that Jesus was about 30 years of age at the start of his ministry. But get this, when he was 12, and you all remember the story, his mom and dad had gone to, I want to say Jerusalem, but y'all Bible scholars, if I jack that up, I know there's some of y'all out there waiting to correct me, so fix it if I'm wrong. But his mom and dad were looking for him, Mary and Joseph, and they were like, where's Jesus? So they had to turn around and go back to find him because he wasn't in the company with them. He wasn't walking along the road back home with him like they thought he was. But this is where Jesus was. Jesus was in the temple. He preached his first sermon when he was 12, but it was 30 before he began his ministry. And this was his first sermon. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And he closed the book. In another Bible, it says he rolled in another, was it Amplified? King James Version, it says he rolled up the scroll and he closed up the book and he gave it again to the minister and sat down, and the eyes of all of them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And somebody might have even asked, isn't that Joseph's son, right? But he preached his first sermon at the age of 12, but he didn't start his ministry until he was 30, and then he died 3 years later. Well, he rose from the grave and resurrected 3 years after that. So what are you in a hurry for? Why are you worried about what people think? Did it negate the fact that Jesus wasn't called because he preached his first sermon at 12 and then didn't come again to preach until he was 30? It was for an appointed time. He even said to his mom, woman, my time has not yet come. Stop worrying about what people think. This is your testing ground. It's your proving ground. No devil in hell can stop the plans that God has for you. Not a one. I assure you. That's written in the book too, but we'll talk about that on another day. So I want to share with you tonight, that wasn't even my sermon, but I just want to share that with you because people have me fired up in a good way, right? I'm so excited for the things that God is doing in our lives, in the lives of believers. Whatever he has called you to do it with a vengeance. Do it with violence. What do I mean by that? Take the reins off, open the box, take the lid off, break through the glass ceiling, and go do what thus saith the Lord. So this is what God gave me for you this week. He gave this to me yesterday morning when I was in prayer. It says you need a change in your thinking. As I was writing on paradigm shifts for a recent blog post, God gave me the story of Paul, or should I say reminded me of Saul of Tarsus, aka the Apostle Paul. God had me define the word paradigm, or the phrase a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift is when your intellect is violently revolutionized or changed in some way via a realization or change in your awareness that shifts immediately your way of thinking from one way to another way. Such was the case with the Apostle Paul. In Acts 9:1-5, meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for a letter to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, meaning followers of Jesus, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus, and many of you know this story, as he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," he replied. "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." So in Acts 9-8, Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind and did not eat or drink anything. In Acts 9:17, then Ananias went to the house and entered it. Now, Ananias didn't just go immediately, and we've talked about Ananias before. Ananias was like, "Jesus, that man kills Christians. Really? Are you really sending me out to be murdered or slaughtered?" Jesus said, "Go, get up and go." And so Ananias, now in Acts 9:17, goes to Saul at the house. Placing his hand on Saul, he said, "Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit." Immediately, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes and he could see again. He got up and was baptized. In Acts 13:9, Saul began to be referred to, or also called, Paul. And from there he began to be known, or become known, as the Apostle Paul. Paul had a paradigm shift. And Paul had a paradigm shift, a revolutionary realization and immediate change in his thinking. Everything changed for him that day. When will it be your day to change? That's what God wanted me to stop by to ask you tonight. When will be the day of your change, your violent revolution and realization that God has more for you? The Apostle Paul met with an immediate paradigm shift through an encounter with God. Do you need a God encounter? A violent revolution and realization in your life? If so, God sent me by to share this with you, that the scales may fall from your eyes so that you will see what you are to do, and then you will go and do it. And then I was going to stop writing there, but I wanted to share one more, and I haven't finished this part of the blog post, but Peter also had a paradigm shift, and his name was changed from Simon to Peter, and he became the rock of the church. So tonight, God told me to stop by to tell you, you need a violent, revolutionary realization of who you are and who he's called you to be. No one is going to stop me from being what God called me to be. Technically, as a lot of people say, the devil should have stopped me when he had me. That's not my quote. Right? Because whatever God has planned for us in our lives is what God has planned for us. And yes, we'll have temptations. Yes, we'll have trials. Yes, the enemy will come and trip us up voluntarily, and God allows him to. But time out for blaming the devil for things that are going on in your life. Many of you are experiencing negative things in your life out of disobedience. You're not doing what God has called you to do. You're too worried about who shows up, who doesn't show up, who pays, who doesn't pay, who comes, who doesn't come, who calls, who doesn't call, who buys, who doesn't buy, who supports, who doesn't support. Who cares? Do what thus saith the Lord, and at the appointed time, at the appointed hour, whether it be 15 years, 12 years, 30 years, tomorrow, next year, or the day before you leave this earth, if you do what God has called you to do, he will call you to do what he called you to do, and you will preach and teach the acceptable year of the Lord. You need a paradigm shift. So tonight, let the scales fall off. Make a decision. Stop worrying about what people think or what people are looking at, what people think you look like. Worry about what he's thinking. Worry about what God is thinking, and worry about what it looks like to God, because in your obedience, he is going to bless you, right? You need a paradigm shift. So tonight I stopped by to tell you to be violent, to be revolutionary, and to come to a realization of who God has called you to be. Show up and be the best, and take the box and the lid off, throw it away, throw it in the trash, and be all that he's called you to be. I love you. God bless you, and I will talk to you later. Bye. Mwah. Bye.